I want to personally thank each of you here tonight for your support of the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. I know, though, that your primary reason for being here is to honor Judge Bell. But I do hope that in some way you will leave with a little better understanding and a little more interest in the Georgia Public Policy Foundation and the work we're doing. As Tom said, we need your help. We appreciate everything that you're doing. And what you do, you help the people of Georgia when you help yourself. Senator Talmadge, Congressman Callaway, we deeply appreciate your sharing the personal remarks about Judge Bell. And as a follow-up to your personal remarks, we've prepared a short video. Mayor just said, "Oh no." And what we would like to do now is, through the video, is give you a glimpse of Judge Bell, and I think you will find it extremely interesting, informative, and those of you who are facing need to turn around, the video screen is to my right, back in the corner, and you will see Judge Bell in a different light.
Well, if you grew up in a rural area of South Georgia, one of the principal topics of conversation is public service. And when I was younger, I had an aspiration to run for office, but I never got around to it, and I always ended up doing other things, being in politics, but not as somebody running for elected office. So all my life I've had an interest in the political system. From the time I was a small boy, I wanted to be a lawyer because my father talked to me a lot about it, took me to the courthouse and left me up there to watch these arguments. Well, I had the worst military career of anybody. I spent 4 years worrying because I wasn't overseas. One time I even had Congressman Pace trying to get me overseas, and he finally wrote me a letter, either called me and said that if he said anything more to the Defense Department, they were going to send me to Alaska. So he said, "You about won your welcome out on this transferring."
We met during the war, right next door to where I lived at the time, at a party. Within the year, we were married, which was 52 years ago. We're exact opposites, as you can tell. Having him in my life has been good for me.
He is the person who goes out of his way to stay in touch with us. He's the person that makes the effort to do so many things. I remember in high school that when I played football here in Atlanta, no matter where he was and as busy as he was, he would always make sure that he got home for those Friday night football games. And not only that, after the game, and I'd go out with the girlfriend or the boys or whatever, that he would wait up for me, and I'd get home about midnight or 12:30, and we would talk over the game at the end of the day. Dad and I have had a lot of spirited discussions, debates, arguments, etc. through the years, but it doesn't bother us. We have stimulating conversations at the table that I learned from him, whereas a newcomer sitting at the table would probably be horrified.
It's pretty intimidating.
Or put off by it.
You usually just sit there and wait for a second that you might be able to say one thing, and you plan it and try to make it as short as possible because you know that you'll be cut off very quickly and won't get to finish a paragraph, maybe not even a sentence.
He's always considered himself a real authority on the Constitution. He made the top grades on that. In law school, he passed the bar after 5 quarters, which is quite an accomplishment. He was probably the most qualified person who ever became the Attorney General of the United States. He was chosen to be the campaign manager for Kennedy in the state of Georgia. And then in addition to that, all that, he was a federal judge for 14 years, and a federal judge not doing mundane things, but in the most, probably one of the most important times in our American history, and that is the civil rights era in the South. He's a great believer of people and getting together and working out their differences. He's a great person to get them together and mediate. He would literally use the chambers of the federal judge in a particular town, bring the parties together in the suit, say the school superintendent and the school board. He'd sit them down and say, all right, Mr. Marshall, I want you to go to the front door, I want you to lock it, I want you to stand by the door, and you're not to let anybody out of this room until these parties have resolved their differences. And then he'd sit down and say, now, don't you think we ought to get started?
Good.
And people would have trouble even looking back at it today and deciding whether that was, for example, a liberal thing that he did or a conservative thing that he did. And I think it was really in his mind neither. It was a practical approach to avoid a very hard situation.
He was appointed chairman of the Atlanta Crime Commission, and he got the job done well under budget and got it done in like 8 or 9 months.
I have selected, and the Senate has now confirmed, a man who will not just be an adequate Attorney General, but who will be a great Attorney General. I noticed in my engineering computations he got 78% of the votes in the Senate. I only got a little over 50% as president.
People had lost respect for the Department of Justice, and indeed people were referring to it in the 70s as a Department of Injustice.
Bell, a 58-year-old Atlanta lawyer, former federal judge, and longtime friend of Mr. Carter, becomes the nation's 72nd Attorney General. Mr. Carter ordered the doors at the main entrance of the department to be reopened for the first time since the Vietnam demonstrations in 1970.
We think this is a symbolic gesture of the way we're going to operate the Justice Department. Open door policy, and we're coming out from behind the barricades. We don't need to be behind locked doors.
We had planned to be there 2 years, if I recall, that the judge told the president. But it ended up almost 3 years. And I think he thoroughly enjoyed every minute he was there. He really did.
He became managing partner of this law firm in the 1950s at a very early age. He left to go on the federal bench in 1961, and then he came back in 76 for less than a year and once again began to play an important role in the firm, and then became Attorney General. Everyone was glad to see him come back in 79, and he then became very actively involved once again in the management of the law firm, and served at various times as chairman of the management committee.
Judge Bell's motto was follow, follow, or get out of the firm. He was very authoritative, and you know, his way was the right way.
You know, Griffin is a very fair person. People just can't help but like him and respect him, even when they strongly disagree with him on occasions. And I've been with him on occasions when other lawyers would really take strong disagreement with what he said, but they would always walk out as friends.
I don't have a mean streak in me. I never hate anybody. I've got that, my father was like that. He would always try to help somebody. I think I got it maybe from him, so I don't ever try to hate anybody. And even if you have to make a hard decision against someone on an employment basis or something like that, I always try to do it in a way where you preserve your dignity.
Judge Bell's greatest strengths are his just native intelligence, his common sense, his extraordinary energy. That at 76 years old, he can outwork and outthink just about any lawyer in our firm.
He's often seen in a coat and tie, and I've always thought that he only had about 3 outfits. One was the coat and tie, of course, his hunting outfit, and his golfing outfit.
Hunting and golf. And he really gets a great amount of enjoyment out of that. And it's a great way to be with friends. It's the only time he really gets to be with them, off with the boys, so to speak, I call it. Well, I did want you to include Missy on this because she and the judge are very close. They, from the day she was delivered to us, they bonded. And the most fun they have together is the judge will take her to the farm, and They will roam the fields and the woods for the whole day, and then once in a while they're running to covey, and Missy will retrieve for them.
Missy and Granddad each have a bowl of cereal together every morning. That's where his soft spot is when it comes to his dog.
As a golfer last year in a contest, he played 80 holes in one day. He was the leader of this charitable endeavor in which I guess more money was raised the more holes of golf you play. He played 80 holes and put all these younger people to bed, literally. They couldn't go to work.
They could not keep up with him.
Excitement and interest is always around Griffin. He breeds that.
We're going to do our very best to see that he never retired.
My dad places a great premium on character and integrity.
He takes sort of a common sense path to what is usually a very good solution.
You know, he really did work very, very hard for where he got.
But even as he's gotten older, and he's now 76, he continues to see visions like a young man.
The man would have made a great musician. It's a real shame.
I can't think of anything better than to be like Granddad.
I am very strong on public service. I have an idea that our country will not be saved well if all the able people just devote their time to making money. So everyone ought to be thinking when they're young about doing public service. I would give them the advice that they ought to face the hard questions. Politics is an honorable profession. What's wrong with Washington is that every congressman that's ever served, or anybody that's served in a high office like Attorney General, particularly if they're from a state with bad climate, they never leave. So I've always thought that we ought to have term limits. And if they haven't rendered their service in 12 years, it's unlikely that they're going to render any great service. The president ought to be served 6 years, no more than that, and not run for re-election. You would then divorce his political party from the White House, which is needed. And we can't play games any longer. We don't have that luxury anymore in this country. We're just talking about balancing the budget. We haven't got to the hard problem of paying the debt. President Roosevelt was a good man. The things he did, most of them were to get us out of the Depression. And the people that want to keep doing the same thing have not adjusted to the time. We've been out of the Depression a long time. Our government was going out of control. The fact that we won't balance the budget is a sign of sickness. But we have got to do something about balancing the budget, reducing the debt, eventually paying it off. We got to simplify our bureaucracies. We got to control the money. We got a very fine system of government, and we got the checks and balances, and it gets a little bit out of whack, but it sort of comes back together. I mean, we've got a great country. Senator Talmadge introduced me one time when I was Attorney General down here in Georgia somewhere, and he had he's got a sort of a caustic wit. And he said that he's proud to know me and that he and I were unique in Washington, that neither one of us ever spent any time in the state or federal penitentiary.
Barbara and I wish we could be with you to pay tribute to our esteemed friend, an outstanding Georgian, Judge Griffin Bell. When I think about Griffin Bell, I think about a man who has served his country with integrity, with decency, with honor, always with honor. Moreover, through his many contributions to his community, he's been what I call a point of light, helping to lift the lives of others, giving something back. Griff, we are very proud of you, proud to call you and Mary our friends, and we are prouder still to join in saluting you as you receive the prestigious 1995 Georgia Freedom Award. Congratulations. Well done, my friend.
Judge Bell, I've often heard you described as a great American, a dedicated Georgian, a brilliant lawyer, a man of compassion and caring, a devoted family man, and a fantastic grandfather. We all have benefited tremendously from your efforts and your many contributions to public service. And we thank you for your continuing efforts to make our state and our nation a better place for all of us, a better place for our children, a better place for our grandchildren. And Judge Bell, would you please join me at the podium to receive the award? On behalf of all the members of the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, it's a great deal of personal pleasure for me to present to Judge Bell the 1995 Freedom Award. And I pray that God will continue to deeply bless you and your family. We love you and we're proud of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hank. This is a great honor and very proud to be associated with the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. We are, Bo and Herman and I all, I suppose, in the same generation. We're not everything we've done is in common, but in my own life, I was a product of the boll weevil revolution. My father had to leave the farm, and he really never got over it. All his life, he missed being a farmer. Griffin Jr.'s got a farm, and I told him once he was a throwback to his grandfather. But these people came and had to get by off the farm. I go back to Stewart County, which is over south of Columbus, where all my ancestors lived, and it's very sad because where there used to be hundreds of farms, there's nothing but pine trees. Where they had a lot of churches, the churches are gone. Even the cemeteries were hard to find. Most of them not kept up. So we went through something like the Dark Ages and really didn't know it. So it's a sad thing to think about. But then we got into the Depression, so we had to learn what to do during the Depression. We were then in World War II, which was to put down the fascists, and that was a revolution. Then we lived for a long time, as most of you did, during the Cold War. We had the stalemate in Korea, but that was part of the Cold War. We lost the Vietnam War, but again, that was part of the overall picture, and we finally did win the Cold War. That was another hard experience for Americans. Then we had the Civil Rights Revolution. It was remarkable that we had such a revolution as the Civil Rights Movement, and we were able to do it within the structure and the strictures of the court system. It was a revolution, but it was a revolution in law, and it's a great tribute to our legal system that we were able to do that. I was sent to South Africa by the State Department in 1986 to study the court system and see if they could do the same thing in South Africa that we were able to do in the American South on our Constitution, enforce the rights of people under the Constitution. I had to report that they could not because they did not have a Constitution. At that time, the whites wished they had a Constitution as much as the blacks wanted one because they were suddenly without any protection at all. It seems to be working out well, but Civil Rights Revolution was really a remarkable thing, and I think in the history of governments. We're now in another revolution. We're in the revolution of the information age, and we're having a lot of corporate downsizing, all kinds of downsizing, because the information age is changing things. Everything has been downsized except the governments. The federal government, when I left the Justice Department as Attorney General, we had 54,000 people there in the whole department, all the different divisions. And I had, in the second year, cut the number by 1,200 and got it down to 54,000. I was at a speech at a meeting in Washington last year. Ms. Reno was speaking, and she was telling how hard it was to manage a department of 96,000 people. But it doesn't seem like it's been very long since I was there, and they've gone from 54,000 to 96,000. That gives you an idea of the downsizing. In government language, downsizing means to increase. It's the same as saying that if we reduce the amount of money we're getting extra every year, we've been cut. That's another. I never have understood how we get the same amount of money and even a little more, but we don't get 1 percentage point above the inflation rate. Somehow we're being cut. So all these things, you have to get used to the government language. I think that public policy is politics. If you don't understand politics, you're not going to have much to do with public policy. You can't control policy. You can't make anything better through policy. We've got some serious things on the national level. I know this organization is dedicated to the state level problems, but on the national level, we're having something going on before our very eyes that needs to be brought under control. Last year, for the first time in history, we had 26 filibusters in the Senate. That means that you can't pass anything in the Senate unless you can get 60 votes so you can cut off the filibuster. That does away with the majority vote in the Senate effectively, and that's also all going already this year. We don't seem to be serious about a balanced budget. We ought to pay the debt off instead of just talking about balancing the budget in 2002. I've got a suggestion for people in Washington. Don't give us any tax cut. Take the money that you're going to give us and pay down the debt. Put the debt in a sinking fund, and every time you think you can cut taxes, just go over and pay something on the debt. That will cut the amount of money we're paying in interest, most of which go into foreigners. If the foreigners get tired of us, they think we're unstable, we're going to have a serious problem about even borrowing money, which is what we're doing. We live it on borrowed money. So that is a serious matter. I want to pledge my support to this organization any way I can do to help with policy. We have a great state. We don't have balanced budget problems in Georgia. We have not had since 10 years after the Civil War ended. When the Reconstruction ended, we put a provision in the Constitution that we have to have a balanced budget. The city of Atlanta has to have a balanced budget, so nothing unusual about that. But we've got a great state, and people often ask me when I'm going to retire, do you have any plans to retire? And I never really think too much about it, but I was thinking Justice Holmes, Oliver Wendell Holmes, was always a great hero of mine, and I was a boy when Roosevelt was elected president, and I remember reading about Roosevelt calling on Justice Holmes, who was at that time 93 years old. He had retired, and when Roosevelt got there, he was reading something in Greek, and Roosevelt said to him, why are you reading in Greek? He said, I'm trying to improve my mind, young man. And he was a famous man in that time, and he fought in the Union Army in the Civil War. He was a captain. He was wounded and decorated for bravery. And when Roosevelt called on him that day, it had been over 60 years since he was a captain in the Union Army. He said something, and this is why I'm mentioning this about Holmes. He said, they said to him, why didn't he retire? And he said, well, in a horse race, the horse can't stop just as soon as it crosses the line. There's a brief period that they call the canter. The horse canters. You slow down, but you don't quit. You can't quit at the finish line, and you don't quit if there's work to be done. I have found in my life that there's always some more work to be done. Maybe you don't do as much, but there's work there, and so you don't quit. We live in a great country. Dean Rusk, after he came back to Georgia, to Athens, to the University of Georgia, was beat up substantially by the media about the Vietnam War. And he had been a distinguished educator in other states, been the director of the Rockefeller Foundation as well. And he had trouble finding a job, and he came to the University of Georgia as a distinguished professor. And wherever anyone had asked him to speak, he would go. Small towns, make speeches. He said he thought he owed that to the people of Georgia. But he said one other thing. He said, I never make a speech where I don't end on saying something about how great our country is. What a privilege it is to live in a country like the United States. I feel the same way. I'm proud to be a Southerner. I'm proud still to be an American. Thank you for the award.